Now, first images have emerged of the stricken Russian warship Moskva before it sank last week. The video clips and photos, which have not been verified, were allegedly taken last Thursday. Ukraine says it struck the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet with 2 Neptune missiles. However, Moscow claims it was damaged after an explosion and it subsequently sank due to stormy seas. Is standing by for us. Good to talk with you, Philip. So more Russian strikes in several parts of Ukraine, including missiles hitting areas in Lviv where you are. Tell us what's been going on there.
Yeah, 4 missile strikes here in Ukraine in the relatively early morning in Lviv, in this western city that for the most part of Russia's invasion of Ukraine has felt like a very safe place. In fact, a safe haven for a lot of refugees coming from the east of the country, those who've seen terrible things. Well, we're now exposed to the reality of this war, which is that Vladimir Putin can essentially send missiles wherever he wants, whenever he wants. Some of them might be intercepted by the air missile defense system, but others are not, and that was the case this morning. The Ukrainian authorities tell us that 3 military targets were hit earlier today, and that one of them was a car repair shop. That's not a military target at all, is it? One would have to think that that missile missed its target. We went to see that area a few hours ago, that car repair shop where dozens of cars had been burnt out, where whole buildings had been destroyed. Behind those buildings is a hotel that had, and maybe still has, refugees in it who'd come from eastern Ukraine specifically to find a safer place. That area that was hit, by the way, you could see the missile crater on the embankment leading to the rail line. And while we were there, we actually saw a train coming through that was going from Dnipro to Lviv. Dnipro is a city just west, just outside of the Donbass region. So one can also presume that on board might have been a lot of women and children who are trying to escape the much worse situation in the east right now. I should also mention the toll from what happened here today: 7 dead, 11 injured at least. That includes 3 who are in a critical state, according to the authorities here in Lviv. And we're also told by the mayor of this city that the child that was injured, 3-year-old, not in a critical condition, but was a 3-year-old who had come here with his mother from the city of Kharkiv in the northeast of Ukraine in order to be in a safer place.
And Philip, Russian reports suggesting its forces hit more than 300 targets overnight across Ukraine. I mean, that sounds like an overwhelming blitz.
Yes, it does, but you do have to include in those numbers that these were artillery strikes as well. This might have been air defense taking out other objects, missiles, maybe Ukrainian missiles. We don't have the details, but yes, it does sound like a big number. But the number of airstrikes has not necessarily increased here overnight. What has changed, though, since the Russian Defense Ministry said that it wanted to hit more military targets in the capital city, Kyiv, is that has happened. There have been military strikes on military targets there 3 days in a row now. Today would be a 4th day. But this has not been the only city that has been hit. Here in Lviv now as well, the city of Dnipro that I just mentioned, that is hit pretty regularly as well. And then, of course, the cities in the Donbass or just outside the Donbass, like Kharkiv, or of course Mariupol in the southeast, which is inside that Donbass region and part of which, of course, Russia wants to take over as quickly as possible. So what we're seeing here from the Russian side would appear to be a preparation for what is to come, because what Russia is doing here is clearly targeting infrastructure. It is targeting military bases. It is targeting for other military targets across the country, and all of this would make it more difficult for the Ukrainian army to essentially defend itself, but also to bring more logistical help to the troops that are in the east. That's why Lviv also is so important, because there are a lot of weapons shipments that come through this part of Ukraine, through the west.
And Philip, you mentioned Mariupol there, where there's just a small number of Ukrainian soldiers protecting the steelworks there. I mean, does that look like the last point of Ukrainian resistance that Russia would have to beat to take full control of Mariupol?
Yeah, that's essentially the analysis. But what is so astounding is that we have been saying that for days, haven't we? And those Ukrainian soldiers who are still in Mariupol are very much seen as heroic here in the rest of Ukraine because they've held out for so long. We don't know exact numbers in Mariupol, and what we have to refer to is the very last we heard from Moscow was days ago when they said there were around 2,500 Ukrainian soldiers still left in Mariupol in that one specific place, that steel plant. It is a very big one with a lot of underground passageways, a very difficult place for Russian soldiers to take control from Ukrainian soldiers. But a bombing campaign there has certainly increased for Russia to be able to declare some kind of a victory, and it would be the very first large city that Russia would be able to say is now under their control. But it's not the case just yet, and what this means tactically for Ukraine is that all of those Russian soldiers, but also Russian-backed separatists who are involved in that fight to try to get that control of the whole city away from those remaining Ukrainian forces, it means that they are occupied with something else than what Vladimir Putin would ideally like them to do, which is to move northwards into other parts of the Donbass region. They're just too busy, and they have been for a very, very long time, to try to gain control of Mariupol. A city, by the way, that is still hoping to get civilians out. Today, again, there was not a single humanitarian corridor organized anywhere in the whole of Ukraine, because according to the Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister Vereshchuk, who gives us these numbers every day, that there were simply too many Russian attacks on those evacuation routes over the last 24 hours.
And Philip, we've got about 20 seconds or so. Given all these Russian attacks that you're talking about, is there any noticeable drop now in morale amongst the Ukrainians?
No, I wouldn't say so, but this here in Lviv came as a bit of a shock because these are people who have become relatively used to a peaceful life here. There are many here who came from other parts of the country where they were in much more danger. This was a reminder that this is another city that can feel peaceful, but that can absolutely be hit by deadly missile strikes from Russia.
Philip, as ever, thank you very much indeed. Philip Crowther, a RISE US correspondent, talking to me there from the city of Lviv in western Ukraine.